Hello everyone, my name is Lawrence Leong, and today I'm going to talk about Sugar Analytics and walk you through creating a custom report using Sugar Analytics. First of all, let's quickly recap what Sugar Analytics is. Sugar Analytics is a new add-on Sugar offering powered by Cognos Business Intelligence that provides advanced analytics and insight integrated tightly into Sugar. Sugar Analytics integrates that Cognos capability directly within the Sugar user interface. So Sugar users don't have to look in other systems, they don't have to hunt around for the right data. They have analytics presented directly to them in their Sugar user interface in context of what they're doing. Sugar Analytics is also powered by market-leading business intelligence technology, specifically IBM Cognos. For those that don't know, IBM Cognos has long been a leader in business intelligence. They rank very, very highly in all of the different analyst evaluations of business intelligence technology. And so one of the aspects that's very exciting about the Sugar Analytics offering is the fact that we're able to sell this Cognos leading technology to Sugar customers, sold by Sugar, serviced by Sugar, and frankly for Sugar sellers and partners, paid for to them just like any other Sugar offering. But for customers, the important thing here is that the analytics that's provided is very, very rich and robust since it's provided by Cognos. And the last thing here is that Sugar Analytics extends Sugar. Sugar has had for some time built-in reporting capabilities, and that will continue to be true. But Sugar Analytics adds a new set of capabilities over and above the Sugar out-of-the-box reporting capabilities, with Sugar Analytics really being geared for advanced analytic and insight scenarios. Two of the areas where Sugar Analytics really shines are areas like drill down, where you're able to drill into a particular piece of data, drill across and drill even further, and trending, being able to compare previous time periods or multiple time periods. So for example, revenue last quarter compared to this quarter, revenue over the last 12 months, all of those aspects of trending or time series comparison. And we'll see some of this as we go through the actual demo. But I'm not going to dwell too much on Sugar Analytics. Hopefully you all know what it is, and if not, there are other resources that can tell you more about it. What I'd like to do here now is focus in on how you go about creating a new or custom report in Sugar Analytics. There's really three steps to it, or three main steps in creating a report. The first step is metadata modeling. This is using the Sugar Analytics Administrator component, which actually uses Cognos Framework Manager under the covers, for those of you that know Cognos. This step is where typically an administrator will be defining all of the business objects that that organization will want to be reporting against, and will build a metadata model for all of those business objects, including how to map those objects to the Sugar operational database. So when I say business objects, I mean things like the representation of an opportunity, or the representation of an account, or in the example we're going to use, the representation of leads, a lead or leads. Those are all examples of business objects, business entities, which under the covers are represented by various tables and columns in the Sugar operational database. But at this part of the process, we're concerned primarily with the actual metadata model and the business definition of a lead or an opportunity or an account or whatever the business object is. The outcome of this step, step number one, is a defined and published metadata model that's called a package. And when I go through the process, you'll actually see me publish a package which really marks the end of step one and the beginning of step two. That package is the definition of the metadata model that we're going to then use to define reports. So moving on to step two, Step 2 is a report authoring stage. This is done typically by somebody who's a report author. It won't be every end user typically, but typically there'll be somebody, maybe it's an operations person, whose job it is to actually predefine those reports that the rest of the organization is going to use. And what the report author will do in step 2 is they'll use the Sugar Analytics author component to open up the previously published metadata package from step 1, and then based on the metadata definition from step 1, the report author will define the actual reports that will be used. And when I say define reports, that means things like define the type of report. Is it going to be a list view or a crosstab or a pie chart or a bar chart or a line chart? All of the elements of the actual presentation of the report. This is also the step where the report author would define formatting, layouts, everything from colors and fonts of column headings to the often important step of defining column titles or field titles that make sense to a business user instead of being a cryptic representation that only makes sense to a database administrator. The other thing that a report author will do is apply things like filters or rules, or define where the user inputs something like a date range, so that when the actual reports are run, the reports have some filtering criteria around them. So all of this is done in the report authoring step. Again, it's typically not done by every end user, but it's typically done by somebody who's a report author. And then once that's done, the report or reports are saved, and that marks the end of step 2, which leads us to step 3. So step 3 is really where the end users come in. This is where the reports are published so that an end user can view them. And there's a number of different ways for an end user to view them. The most common is for the end user to view those as dashlets from within the Sugar user interface. So part of step 3 then is actually making the report or reports available to the Sugar dashlet picker, and then the end user can place them on their Sugar home screen or their Sugar screens just like they would any other dashlet. So we'll see some examples of that as we go through this. There are also other ways for end users to view those reports. Those reports can be published, they can be embedded in something like a PDF or actually exported to Excel, and then those can be sent, emailed, or otherwise distributed, and they can be viewed separately. And all of this can also be scheduled. You can schedule a report to run, let's say, every week, and again, that could be creating it so that it appears in the Sugar user interface, or it can also be scheduling a PDF that gets sent out every week. But those are all elements of step 3, which is really the step of publishing the report so that end users can see them using Sugar Analytics or using viewing them separately. So keep all of these steps in mind as I go through the demo here. And I'm going to refer back to these 3 steps: metadata modeling, that's typically done by an administrator; report authoring, typically done by a report author; and then actually viewing the report for an end user, which is done typically by a Sugar end user. All right, so let's begin, and let's actually look at an example of, this is an example, probably a not atypical example of a report that was actually created using Sugar reporting, but exported to a spreadsheet and then manipulated in a spreadsheet. So one of the common scenarios that we hear is that a lot of customers run reports using Sugar reporting, and then they export that report to a spreadsheet. They manipulate that spreadsheet, which might be formatting it, might be grouping, sorting, filtering, etc. And then they end up with something that looks like this. And a lot of times those customers will do that, on a regular basis, for example, every week, and that's a lot of manual work. So one of the things Sugar Analytics can do is automate a lot of that work so that it doesn't have to be manually done week after week after week. So this is an example of a fairly typical report. In this case, this is showing leads by type of lead. Maybe it's a lead source, and by creation date. So this might be the type of report that a sales or marketing manager uses to look at. Let's just look at how many leads came in over these dates, and where did those leads come from? Did it come from an auto account development activity, or did it come from the website, or did it come from a specific mortgage campaign we are running? This is an insurance specific example, obviously. But if you look at the actual kind of makeup of this report, it's a relatively simple crosstab of leads by creation date, with totals for those leads in each of the cells here, and a grand total at the bottom. Right? Relatively straightforward, simple kind of thing, but as many of you probably know, it takes a little bit of manual work to create using some of the existing Sugar tools. So what we're going to do is let's take a look at how would we go about creating a report like this in Sugar Analytics. So remember the 3 steps, metadata modeling being the first step. So now I'm gonna start with that metadata modeling step. So what I would do is I would go into my Sugar Analytics admin component, which is actually based on Cognos Framework Manager. This is already set up to point to a instance of Sugar, and I'm just going to define a new project. So now I'm working on new leads report. Let's just say that's my project. I need to scroll over, and I'm going to, I've already tried this, so I'm going to just replace the existing report. So I can do this in a variety of languages. I'm going to do it here in English. And one of the things you'll see then is the metadata modeling tool needs to know what data source to point to. So I'm simply going to point it to the Sugar operational database. So there's my metadata source that I'm going to specify. I'm going to go against the SugarCRM database. And here, this should look now familiar to you. Those of you that are used to working with Sugar, this is the SugarCRM database and all of its tables, views, synonyms, procedures, and functions. So if I expand tables, this should look familiar. This is all of the tables in the Sugar operational database. In this case, I'm working with a more or less stock or standard Sugar data model, but it's important to point out that if I had made customizations to the Sugar data model, all of those customizations would show here. So I would see, I'm not sure if there are any here, but I should see, so here we go, there's some custom fields here and custom queries. So if I have customized the Sugar data model, I would pick those custom fields and queries in the exact same way that I'm about to proceed here. But just to keep this simple, I'm going to keep this to more or less standard Sugar fields and Sugar data, the standard Sugar data model. If you'll recall our report, it was a leads report, so I'm just going to select the leads table. Right? If I wanted to, I could select all of the different columns of the leads table, but just to kind of keep this simple and for time, I'm just going to select all of the elements of the leads table and go ahead and import and build the metadata model based off of that. I have to uncheck using primary and foreign keys because we don't use that in the Sugar data model. And there we go. We've completed that import process. So now I can go ahead and finish this. So this is a simple example where now I've created a metadata model called new leads report. It's fairly simple. It just uses the single leads table and all of its fields. And again, we'll do that just for simplicity. I can just to switch out of the narrative, here's an example that's a little bit more complicated where I've done a join between a couple of tables. This would be a different example where I wanted to look at opportunities by account. So I actually have to pull in a couple of tables, the opportunities table, the accounts table, and actually define the relationships between them. But let's stick with our simple example of leads just to illustrate this and continue with that leads example. So here's my report, here is my metadata definition. Now you'll remember I said that I had to create a package, so that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to actually create a package. I'll call this new leads package, and we're going to publish this to the BI server so that all of our report authors and ultimately users can take advantage of this metadata model. Sugar Analytics supports MySQL, so I'm just going to use the MySQL variant here, and there we go. We've created a package, and now I need to publish that package so that my BI server in the next step can access it. This is relatively trivial here because I'm doing all of this on one machine, but this is how you would do it if you wanted to publish that package to multiple locations, maybe to a BI server on the network. You could select this option, and that would allow other BI servers, report servers essentially, to be able to access this metadata model. But in this case, we'll again keep it simple. We're going to publish it. There is an option here to apply security to the report. Only allows certain users to have access to that report in addition to the Sugar field level security. And that's a topic for a different discussion. But I will just highlight here that that is possible to do. But to keep this simple, I'm not going to define any specific security around this report. So I'm going to go ahead and publish it. There's a verification that happens automatically as I publish. Cognos will actually go back and verify the model against the actual database, make sure that it follows all of the data, rules and constraints and so forth, and matches the table definitions. And as you can see, we've now successfully verified and published the package, and it's gone into the public folders, and it's named the new leads package. So let's just exit out of here, and I'll just go back to this picture. So what we've done essentially is step number 1. We've defined a metadata model around leads and all of the items in the leads table, and we've created a metadata model and published it for this new leads package. Now what we're going to do is go into step 2, the report authoring step, and we'll now sign on into Sugar as a report author. So here's an example of the Sugar screen, Sugar home screen, let's say we're the report author, so we now want to go into creating and managing our reports, and we need to be able to author reports. So I'm going to actually, instead of going to the Sugar Reports module, I'm going to launch the Cognos or Sugar Report Authoring module. Let's see if that worked. There we go. And now I'm launching my Cognos Report Authoring tool. I'm actually going to come at it a different way and come in here and launch our Report Authoring tool. So you'll remember that we just created a new package which we called leads. So I'm going to select that package. And so the Cognos authoring tool is now going to validate that package and start up the Cognos report authoring. So remember, now I'm in step number 2 here. I'm going to use that previously defined package, and I'm now actually going to create the report so that it looks something like this. So let's go back and wait for this to spool up. There we go. We want to create a new workspace. Now, this particular report is a cross-tab, right? It's a cross-tab because it's essentially leads cross-referenced, if you will, by creation date. So in the tool here, I'm going to select crosstab. There's many other choices of reports that I have, as you can see. I can do a simple list. I can do charts, which gives me all of the variants of all of the different types of charts you would expect: pie chart, line chart, bar chart, etc. But in this example, let's do crosstab, and we'll go ahead and select it. So now what the report authoring tool is giving me is a template for a crosstab report here. And on this side, here is all of my metadata that came from the previous package that I created in step 1. So here's my leads business object with all of its attributes or fields. Now I can decide how I want to basically do this report. So you can, if we go back to our Excel spreadsheet, you can see that essentially it's creation date over here and it's lead type over here with basically a count in the middle and totals on the end, right? So if you remember that, so I'm going to take creation date, which in our parlance here is date entered, and I'm going to take lead source and put that over here, and I'm going to further define that this is by lead. I'm keying off of my lead field, which is basically measured by the ID field. So I've got date entered across the top. I've got lead source across the vertically. Now what I want to do here, this is what's called the intersection of the crosstab, and again, this is fairly standard business intelligence kinds of manipulation. So anybody in your organization or your partners will be very familiar with this. I am now going to specify that at the intersection of this crosstab, I want to do a count. And when I do a roll-up, I want to do a total. Right, and obviously, as you can see, there's lots of other examples of mean, standard deviation, etc. But what I want for this report is counts and totals on the end. So that's what I've specified. And here I'm just going to specify my totals. Automatic summary, I want it to automatically calculate totals for me. So there I go. There's my totals on the end. And let's just make this a little bit more user-friendly. I'm going to edit the label here. Instead of this cryptic ID, I'm going to call it leads by date created. Or actually, let's call this lead source. There we go. And let's call this leads by date created. This could be my report title, leads by date created. There we go. So this is an example of what this crosstab report looks like. If we want to actually, we're not quite done with the report authoring, but if we want to just run it, we can, within the authoring tool, run it in HTML, and there we can see what the report looks like. So this is selecting all of the count of leads with totals at the bottom and on the right-hand side of leads by lead source and by date with the date created. And just based on the demo data that I happen to have, I've only got 2 dates created here. So I've got September of 2013 and April 14th of 2014. But if I had more data with different dates created, I'd see all of those across the top. And here's my totals. So that's our report so far. There's a couple of additional things we can do, right? If we go back to our example, we actually need to apply some filters, right? A lot of times you don't want all leads by date created. If you did, then we'd be essentially done. But in this case, if we want to create a filter, we can do that. So let's create a filter, and let's say we want to filter based on let's say we want to filter based on the last 365 days. So every time we run this report, we want to look at the last 365 days of leads. So it turns out that what we would do is we basically create a SQL expression. In this case, this expression specifies that we want to take the SugarCRM database, the leads table, the date entered field, and we want a date that's between the current date and the current date minus 365. So that, again, at first it may look complicated, but that is relatively straightforward for anybody that understands, SQL and BI filtering. There's a tool here that allows us to validate this against the actual database server, so that makes sure that we typed in the expression correctly, no errors, so great. So we're going to accept that. And then the last thing we want to do is this date entered. Let's say we want that expression to actually show us the date entered. So we're going to edit that expression, and again, let's put in a cast function that gives us the actual date entered, which is essentially that same, but we're going to just apply cast to it. So again, we'll verify that expression, no errors, and so we're all good. So now, if we run this report, this is what it looks like. We've got our title here, leads by date created, lead source. We've got our dates here, and then we've actually got the lead source and our counts in here and our totals. There's no data here just because of the way my demo data happens to be set up, but there we go. We've got leads by date created. So the last thing that I want to do here is I'm going to save this report. And I'm going to save it as, let's just call it leads by date created. And that saves the report so that later on our users can actually go and select that particular report. So again, coming back to these 3 steps, what we just did was we were in step number 2. We authored a report. We defined it as a crosstab. Using the previously published metadata package, we did a little bit of formatting of titles, we put a filter on it, and then we saved that report. So now let's move on to step 3, and we'll see how now do we take this report and place it in the Sugar user interface. So if I go back to my Sugar home screen, right, and this is where we would make it available to Sugar end users, we should be able to go look at how a user would actually add a dashlet like they normally do. This is the normal dashlet picker, but one of the things we see on the dashlet picker is something we've called Cognos reports. And in Cognos reports, we see all of the different reports that we had created and published and saved, and we get to choose from all of those different reports and leads. So I think our lead was, what did we call it? New package leads. Let's try this one. And we will save it. And that should give us, oops, that might not have been the right one. That should give us the Cognos report placed as a dashlet in the Sugar user interface. Right? Oh, here it is. Down here at the bottom, here's our lead test placed as a report for leads, with lead source, creation date, and our total placed as a dashlet in the Sugar user interface. So that's essentially how that's how you would place it on the Sugar user interface if you wanted to see it as a dashlet in the Sugar user interface. If instead you didn't want to see it as a dashlet in the Sugar user interface, you could actually go to these packages and you have a couple of different options in terms of what you want to do with it. Right? You can actually go and you can take a look here at all of the different reports, not viewed in a dashlet, right? And the reason for this is sometimes the dashlet is hard to see, if there's a lot of data. Sometimes Sometimes some reports users will want embedded directly in the Sugar home screen, like that case. Other times they'll want to look at all of their different reports and just be able to run a category, run a particular report. The way they would do that is from this screen. So basically now you're using the Cognos, it's called connection part, which has essentially been launched from Sugar, but now you're able to go look at all your different reports. You're able to do things like schedule them. You're able to create a job to schedule them, and so on and so forth. So this is the mechanism that you would use to actually go and schedule them, publish them, run them, export them as HTML and whatnot. And just in case you want to see how that looks, right, you would actually be able to here run a report as a PDF in Excel and CSV, XML, etc. So that's a quick overview of, again, report creation, right? And just as a recap in terms of what we did, we initially signed in as an administrator using the metadata modeling tool. We then went in as a report author and authored our report based on that existing metadata model. And lastly, we went and placed that report as a dashlet in the Sugar UI, and we had options to publish or view that report separately as well. So that ends this particular demonstration. I thank you for your time, and if you have any other questions, please don't hesitate to contact me or SugarCRM. Thank you very much.